Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm gonna show you how to use NSUserDefaults to save and load custom objects. So you might be already familiar with NSUserDefaults, like the basic. Mostly it's used to maybe store a simple NSstring or NSNumber or NSArray or something like that. But in this tutorial, I'll show you how to do that with the custom object of your own. So first we'll create a single view application, and then product name, I'm just gonna call it NSUserDefaults tutorial to store custom objects. Okay, super long product name. Device iPhone, I'll check use storyboard and we'll use automatic reference counting. Click next and then create our project. And then once that's created, I'm just gonna click on my folder here, right click, and then so new file. So now I'm gonna create a choose Cocoa Touch and Objective-C class. I'm just gonna create a person model. So class will be person, subclass person will be a subclass of NS object. And we're gonna click next, leave the target as NSUserDefaults tutorial to store custom objects. And here's our person.h and person.m. I'm just gonna move it up here. So I click on the person.h and I'm gonna just declare some properties for a person. So a person will have a first name, last name, and a social security number. So now at property non-atomic strong, and our first name will be NSstring. So I'll do NSstring first name and a property non-atomic strong NSstring, and person will also have last name, and person will also have a social security number. I'm just gonna call that SSN. So those are the three properties for a person. And in our person.m, what we're gonna do is actually go back to our person.h, and we need to conform to NS coding. So then in our person.m we can do init with coder, and then we're gonna do self equals super init. So this init with coder method automatically gets called when you initialize a person. So when you do person equals person alloc init, it's automatically gonna call init with coder. So if self is not nil, then we do self dot first name equals a decoder. Actually, we need a couple methods. So let me do this method later. We're gonna do this method first. And encode with coder. So encode with coder, we're gonna encode our object. So a coder and encode object. So we're gonna encode self first name for key, and the key we can just make up anything as long as it matches up with our init with coder. So the key, I'm just gonna call it first name, and here I'm gonna do a coder and encode object self last name for key, last name, and we're gonna do a coder encode object self SSN for key SSN. Alright, and now we'll go back to our init with coder initialization method. And again, I'll do if self is not nil, then we'll do self dot first name equals a decoder decode object for key, and the key will have to match up to here. So it's gonna decode object for key. So self dot first name, the key is first name. Self dot last name equals a decoder decode object for key. So it's gonna decode the key is last name. Then self dot SSN equals a decoder decode object for key, and the key is SSN. Alright, and at the very end we're just gonna return self. So that's it for our person.h and person.m. And actually I will just go to my main storyboard and see what we're gonna add. So now we know that person has a first name, last name, and a social security number, and we have defined our init with coder method and encode with coder method. So in our main storyboard, I'm just gonna add a label for the person's first name. I'll just call it first name. And then I'll add a label for the person's last name, and I'm gonna add a label for here, let me make it a little wider, and I'm gonna add a label for the social security number SSN, and I'm gonna add some text fields so we can edit the first name, last name, and social security number. So I just drag the text field on there. If these options don't appear, just click on show the attributes inspector and then go to placeholder text, and I'm just gonna type in first name. I'll drag in another text field, and for this one I'll just type in the placeholder text last name, and here I'm gonna drag another text field, and I'm just gonna call this one the placeholder text SSN. I'm gonna throw in a couple buttons in there, so just go to your object library, and then I just start typing buttons. And this one I'm just gonna call this button read person, and there's another button that I'll call write person. Okay, so basically the idea is I'm gonna store all of the values in the NSUserDefaults. So when you type in the text fields, the first name, last name, and social security number, we do a write person, and it's gonna get saved to the NSUserDefaults. But instead of having 3 different NSUserDefaults for the first name, the last name, and social security number, I'm just gonna have one NSUserDefaults that actually stores the custom object that we have, which is the custom object is person. So instead of storing 3 different, instead of storing 2 NS strings and an NS number, we're just gonna store a person. So, and then these labels are just gonna show the values that is stored. Alright, so let me change the background color of this. of the view. Sorry. Okay, I'll make it orange. Alright, and now in our view controller, we'll just do in our view controller, I'm just gonna define my the NSUserDefaults key that I'm gonna use. So #define k NSUserDefaults person. So in this tutorial, I'm only gonna have one person, but you can extend off of this if you need to have more. So this is the key NSUserDefaults person. All right, and I'm just gonna start dragging the elements onto my view controller.h. So just control click and drag. First name, I'm just gonna call it first name label. Connection is outlet. Type is UI label. Storage is weak. And then last name, control click and drag it. Connection type is outlet. I'm just gonna call it last name label. Type is label. Storage is weak. SSN, I'm just gonna call it SSN label. Connection type outlet. Type label. Storage weak. First name, control click drag. I'm gonna call it first name text field. Connection type is outlet. Type UI text field. Storage weak. Alright. Last name, I'm just gonna call it last name text field. SSN, it's gonna SSN text field. Alright, there's a couple more elements in there. So read person, I'm just gonna call it read person button pressed, and connection will be action. Type is ID, event is touch up inside. Right person, control click drag. Again, connection will be action. Name is, what's the button called? Sorry, the button's called right person. Alright. Control click drag. Connection is action. Name is right person button press. Type is ID, event touch up inside, argument sender. Alright, so then that's our view controller.h, and then let's create one more class to perform the read and write from the view controller. So actually, I think let's not create another class. It might make things a little too complex. So alright, so in our view controller, in our view controller.m, here when I remove all these things, you click on your view controller.m, and then I'm just gonna delete this did receive memory warning method. I'm not gonna do anything with it. And in view controller.m, I'm just gonna add a couple of methods. So I need to import person.h first because we're gonna be using that in our view controller.m. So I'm just gonna create a method called write person object. So this write person object, what it's gonna do is it's gonna save the person to our NSUserDefaults person, and we're also gonna have a method called read person object with key. and it's gonna take an NSstring, and the string is called key. Well, this one won't be void. This one is gonna return a person. Alright, so for now, let's I'll write a comment. So this one will read a person from the key that is passed in. And this one is gonna, this method is gonna store person to the NSUserDefaults key. And this NSUserDefaults key is the one that we've defined here. NSUserDefaults person. The key that's gonna be passed in is also the same key, because in this case we only have one key, which is NSUserDefaults person, but later on if you have like multiple persons, you can pass in different keys here. Alright, so now we're gonna define let's define the right person object first. Right person object button, and it passes in a person. So in the right person object method, we're gonna create an NSData person object equals NSKeyed archiver archive data with root object. And the root object is gonna be person, which is this argument that's passed in. Then do NSUserDefaults, standard user defaults, set object for key. So the object is going to be the person object from the NSData, and the key is going to be NSUserDefaults person, which is the key that we have defined right here. So this defines this, so this is the actual key. So let's go back to our viewController.m, and then at the very end we're going to do NSUserDefaults, standard user defaults, synchronize. And in our read method, we're going to have NSData also person object equals NSUserDefaults, standard user defaults, value for key. Actually, I'll do objects for key. I never really had problems with either object for key or value for key, but you can use either one. Well, in this example, you can use either one. So the person equals NSKeyed archiver. No, not archiver. Keyed unarchiver, because this one we're reading. Unarchiver, unarchive object with data, and the data is going to be the person object that we've just extracted here from this key, and then at the end we're just going to return person. Alright, so our read and write method's pretty simple. The write is here, read is here, so that's that. And now to we'll do a write person button click. So this is what will happen when the user clicks the write person button. Okay, so when the write person button is clicked, we'll do person equals person alloc init, and then we'll do person set first name, and the first name will be whatever was from the first name text field. So first name text field text. Alright, so this first name text field, just a reminder, is here. Last name text field is here. SSN text field is here. First name label, last name label, SSN label. Okay. Now, just a quick reminder, I didn't do anything there. So go back to our view controller.m and then let's do the same thing. So person set last name self last name, not last name label, last name text field text person set SSN and okay. The SSN is an NSNumber, so just to make things a little bit simpler, I'm just gonna create a variable here, NSNumber. I'm just gonna call it SSNNumber equals NSNumber number with int and the int will be from my SSN text field. So I'm just gonna do self SSN text field text int value. I'm not gonna do any error checking here. I'm just gonna assume that the number entered in the SSN text field is just gonna be an int. So person set SSN, we're gonna set it to be whatever that SSN number is. This one here. Okay, and then from there, from there we're just gonna call self right person object, and the object that we're gonna pass in is person. So when you call right person object, which is this method here, it's gonna it's gonna archive the person object into this NSData person object, and then it's gonna set the person object for this key, the NSUserDefaults person key, and then it's gonna store it. And then so when we click the read button, it will read whatever was in this key, but actually not whatever was in this key, because it's gonna call this method and then it's gonna pass in the key, and it will read whatever value was in the key that was passed in. So we'll do person equals person alloc init, and then we'll do person equals self read person object with key, and in this case the key is the NSUserDefaults person, and then I'll do self first name label set text to be whatever this person's first name is. So person first name. And then we do self last name label set text person last name. And then we do self SSN label set text NSstring string with format, and then I'm just gonna do %d, which is to display an integer format. Just do person SSN int value. Oh, I need one more brackets here. One here, int value. Oops, missing one here. And that's gonna, when you press the read button, that's going to display whatever value was stored in this key. So let me do one more thing in the right, because when after the write is done, I think it would be nice to kind of just show the values right away after the write. So I'm just gonna call self read person button press, and the sender will be no. Alright, so let's run our application and see if that works. Okay. Oh, so I just did Command R to run the application, or you can press this run guy right here. So yeah, okay. So at least the screen's showing up. So first name, clicked on it. Oh, I can't get to my button. Let me do one more thing here. Conform to UI text field delegate, and in our view controller.m in the viewDidLoad method, I'm just gonna say self. Oh, sorry, computer slowing down. Self first name, not first name label. First name text field set delegate self. Self last name text field set delegate self. Self SSN text field set delegate self. Alright, and then I'm just gonna write the UI text field delegate here. It's gonna be text field should return, and then I'm just gonna do return text field resign first responder. Alright, so just click run again, and then we'll see. This just when you hit the return button, it just dismisses the keyboard. Alright, so first name will be Tom, last name will be Mont, SSN will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then hit the return button, and then write person. Oh, okay, good. At least it showed up. So Tom, Mont, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we will stop the app and relaunch it. So I just click run again. So now first name, last name, and SSN is gone. So if I do read person, there's our Tom, Mont, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can also have different things, like let's say we change the first name to, let's say, Wendy, last name, what's Wendy's last name? Wendy's last name is, no, Tom would be too confusing. Wendy try 884231. Okay, return, do a right person, and there goes the information, or we can change it. Do return, and then that's the first name, last name, and the text field. So you can't really see it come into play, but we can see this if we relaunch the application again. So stop, and now click, we'll do a run. So now none of the information is displaying, so now we do read person, and the information came up that we have. So instead, so this I think this tutorial is useful because instead of just defining a bunch of NSUserDefaults, and then imagine like your person properties have more than first name, last name, and SSN. So you can have a first name, last name, like, I don't know, address, like social security number, like where you work, like how much money you have, just like all the information that you might have. If you do that, and then in your view controller or wherever you define your NSUserDefaults, like you're gonna have all, like, so many different NSUserDefaults for one person. And imagine you have multiple persons, and then that's gonna take so many NSUserDefaults dictionary, like, keys. So you might mess up somewhere, but in this case you just have to define like all your code once, and then have like one key for one person. So that's that. So in this case, instead of having a key for first name, last name, and social security number, you have a key for a person, and then you can use that here. So the code is pretty short, but I think you get used to it. Sorry, this tutorial took a little longer than I thought, but alright, thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.